Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. It's 3 p.m. here in the UK, and it's 10 a.m. Eastern, and you're all most welcome to join us here at 0 Days Live. Now, today is our bumper Easter show, or as I prefer to call it, our extravaganza. So, of course, I brought along with me some Easter eggs, and I've dressed in very spring-like colours today because it is dress down day as well. And I would also like you all to join me on a virtual Easter egg hunt today as a little bit of fun. Now, around my studio here today, I've hidden a total of 5 different eggs. I want you all at home to guess where they are and to type your answer in the console on your screen, please. If you're right, there are no other prizes to be won other than the kudos of knowing that you guessed correctly. So it's all a bit of fun, and I'll be asking Kerry and Steve and my very special guest today to do the same thing too. Now, today we are combining GovSec Thursday and Fun Friday. Yesterday was, of course, Wednesday, and that meant Security Begins Here Day. And we welcome back to the studio Gary Foote, Chief Information Officer of HAS F1, who spoke about managing pressure and also touched on our recent research into CISO stress as well. Now, most of you will know this already, but a quick introduction from me. My name's Stuart Reed, and I'm with Nominet, focused on cyber solutions. And you may be familiar with Nominet being responsible for managing the .uk domain, which we've been doing for over 23 years now, and have something in the order of 15 million domains under management. In addition, and building on that experience of domains and DNS, or the domain name system, we also provide cybersecurity solutions to protect both government and enterprise customers worldwide from cyber attacks on their networks. And that includes providing service to the UK government's National Cybersecurity Centre too. Now, at Nominet, ensuring people are able to be connected, included and secure is at the heart of what we do. And with a lot of people at the moment feeling perhaps slightly disconnected from one another, especially with the usual conferences, events and face-to-face meetings being paused right now, we thought it'd be a great opportunity to do something a bit different and create a webcast that is open for all within or with an interest in cybersecurity. The premise of our show is really simple. It's to provide an opportunity to hear from others in the industry, get around what's going on in the news, share some thoughts on best practice as we navigate our way through what is and continues to be a changing world. But most importantly, we want your involvement too. During today's show and of any of the live shows that you join, you'll notice the console on your screen has the ability for you to ask or type questions into it, so please do use it, please. Any questions that you have today, please do ask us, and they'll read them out today during the webcast. Also, as I mentioned before, we're doing a virtual Easter egg hunt here today at 0 Days Live, so please also use that same console to type in your best guess of where I might have hidden Easter eggs in our virtual studio today. Oh, and also some breaking news as well, hot on the heels of discovering our very first superfan in the form of Tim the Bot last week. This week we have another superfan, so let's take a very quick look. As you can see, some very nice comments here. His name's not dissimilar actually. This is Tom. And as you can see, he's left an equally courteous message for us. So thank you very much, Tom the Bot, much appreciated. Now, as regular listeners or viewers of the show will know, we're keeping this all very authentic, as you can see behind me. We are running these webcasts every single weekday live between now and at least June time, and generally for about 30 minutes each. But because this is a bumper session today, they're probably going to run a little bit longer, and there's no hard and fast rules, so we'll just go with it. Now, we are live, so anything could and probably will happen, but we hope you'll agree that if and when it does happen, it's just part of the natural charm of the show that we're providing. And whilst we are live, we're also available at your convenience on demand. So for any reason you're not able to join us for the whole of today's show or any of the other shows live, then please do catch us on demand. And we can be found at nominetcyber.com/0dayslive. which is exactly the same page that you signed up from. So it really couldn't be easier. As with every show, we're joined by a great team, both joining me here in the virtual studio and also behind the scenes, plus a very special guest joining us each and every day. And of course, we cannot do it without you. So much thanks from us for you joining us here at 0 Days Live. Each day we welcome new people to our growing virtual community, and we really do appreciate you making the time to join us in your day. Now, the big question this week is, how are you taking your tea? For me today, with the giddiness of excitement of a bumper Easter show, I'm on chamomile tea, so cheers, and it's actually rather pleasant. Steve, where are you? And more importantly, how are you getting on with your tea choices?
Hi Stuart, yes I am still in sunny Oxfordshire, and today I have a rather nice glass of iced tea. I thought because of the temperature outside it would be a good choice today.
Excellent, and I see that the sunshine is also reflected in your clothes as well, some equally spring-like attire today.
Yeah, you did say it was Fun Friday and we could wear what we want, so
absolutely, it is a Friday almost virtually, and it is fun, definitely. So yes, you're most welcome to wear that very colourful shirt and enjoy your nice iced tea. Speaking of tea, Kerry, how are you taking yours today?
Hi, yes, so today I'll show the teapot again. It is coconut truffle. I have to say, it is one of the most disgusting things I've ever tasted, but it smells very nice.
Well, and it also sounds quite nice as well. But I think actually today, Steve has probably trumped you with his lateral thinking and going with the iced tea selection. But please do let us know, everyone that's joining us, how you are taking your tea today, and Kerry will read it out. So simply type it into the console on your screen. Again, a quick reminder also, don't forget to guess where I've hidden the Easter eggs too. I'll be asking both you, Kerry, and you, Steve, later on in the show as we move into the Fun Friday element. But as I mentioned just a few moments ago, today is, of course, our bumper show, and I'm delighted to welcome our very own Dave Polton to the show, who is VP of Sales and Operations here at Nominet. Very warm welcome to you, Dave. Thank you for joining us on the show.
Hi there, Stuart. How are you doing?
There we go. A little bit delayed. No reflection of your personality there at all, Dave. So Thank you for joining us. We're doing very well here. We're all very excited at the show today. We're also very excited for you to be joining us too. So thank you very much for joining us. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. Just making the most of sitting in a rather warm office today. It's nice to get a bit of warmth coming out of it.
It is indeed. And speaking of warmth, how do you take your tea?
Well, I prefer my tea with G and in front of it actually, but not right now. So I'm just taking a good old English breakfast.
All right, very solid choice. We've had a couple of times on the show from other people as well, so you're in good company. As I mentioned, great to have you on the show to join us to talk on what is our bumper show. But kind of first things first, I know that your role spans both the government and enterprise customers at Nominet, and from a cybersecurity perspective, we know how important frameworks are as part of those conversations. So what I'd like to do is ask you a few questions around those frameworks and get the benefit of your experience on it. So I guess the first thing to really get to grips with is getting an overview of what frameworks actually are and how people use them in the security world.
Sure. Okay, so if I take it back to basics, and if you think in the cybersecurity world, a framework is a system of standards, of guidelines and best practices that help organizations manage the risks that arise in a digital world. But frameworks aren't new. They've been around for many years and they're used in many industries. So if you were to look at finance, for example, they would help accountants keep track of transactions. So an accounting framework is built around concepts like assets, liabilities, costs, controls. Equally, if you look in the physical world, a framework's a set of beams and connections that hold up a building. So if you reflect that then back into cyber, the cybersecurity frameworks are designed to give security practitioners a reliable, systematic way to mitigate cyber risk. And there's a whole host of different cybersecurity frameworks that I'm sure many people have heard of. So I'm sure many can name them: NIST, Cyber Essentials, ISO 27001. The list just goes on. But typically, they generally sit into sort of 3 different areas. So you can have control frameworks, which take more of a technical approach. They provide a baseline of the baseline for a set of controls to assess the current technical state of an organization and help prioritize implementation. You then can build on that with a program framework, which is typically sitting above, obviously, a control framework, and then they focus more on the overall state of a security program, and they measure the state of said security program and its effectiveness. And they typically also provide the tools to help simplify communication with the wider business. The last one, but by no means least, is a risk framework, which is the panacea, where everyone wants to try and get to. So it's a structured program to try and assess and manage risks. So you can identify the risk in your organization, and by identifying those risks, it really does then help prioritize and drive security investment.
Okay, and I think you touched on it a little bit there, but I wouldn't mind understanding it for the benefit of everyone that's tuning in. But what value do you think that all of these different frameworks really have from a cybersecurity perspective? How does it really assist those cybersecurity professionals, and does it translate to the wider business as well?
Absolutely, and I did allude to it, and you're quite right. So this one's actually quite simple. So as cybersecurity professionals, I think we take a lot about what we know around cybersecurity for granted. So it can often be quite challenging for us to then articulate those challenges to the organisations in simple terms that people that don't necessarily experience cybersecurity day in, day out, and they're obviously outside the field. So as well as looking at frameworks to deliver best practices, enable a bit of prioritisation of the workloads, or drive a improvement in your security practitioner, any decent cybersecurity framework provides a common language for everyone in the business to be able to understand, comprehend, and communicate about cybersecurity. And that is the true value, not just to a security practitioner, but also to the wider business.
Okay, thank you. And I see again, fastest finger first, Steve. Again, it can only mean one thing. He's got his virtual hand up. He wants to be asking a question as well. Go ahead, Steve.
Yes, please. Dave, I read your blog on building an investment case for cyber by using these frameworks. Could you just talk us through that in terms of how a member of the security team or a CISO can build that investment case to invest more in cybersecurity products by using these frameworks?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, as I mentioned, so frameworks give quite a thorough overview of what good security looks like, and therefore they can almost build like a checklist, if you like, to understand where CISO, security practitioners, security managers should start to invest in best of breed security. But more importantly, my blog goes in and talks about the challenges that CISOs face when they're trying to build that investment case for that security and those technologies. And I think often you find that CISOs will end up in a discussion at the bottom end. So they're talking around, how do I look at the lower level threats, when really it's much more valuable to try and turn that around to the business and talk about risk. I would often talk about how we've seen cybersecurity change over the number of years that I've been working, and I'm drawing this because it's typically a sort of S-curve of where we sort of started focusing on threats, started to understand assets, build security operations, but ultimately we want to talk about security risk. But how do you discuss risk with a business? And the only way you can create a common language to discuss risk is by using those frameworks. And you can then build that heat map, you can build a risk profile, so the entire business can understand exactly what they could be exposed to. And when you can articulate that, businesses understand risk because they've been managing risk for many, many years. And as cyber professionals, we just need to talk the right language. So if we start talking business risk, it means we're going to be more likely to be able to get the investment we need to mitigate those risks and reduce the impact it could have on that business. And ultimately, frameworks support that.
Thanks, David. Do you think there's still a challenge there for CISOs in terms of getting investment in cyber from the board? We talked to Gary yesterday about the board being more on board in terms of the culture of cyber and the support for a CISO from a kind of a mental health perspective. But what about investment? Are we still seeing a challenge there for CISOs in that area?
Yes, undoubtedly there's a challenge. I think it's about understanding how to prioritize that investment. And if you look at the overall challenge that CISOs are facing, and I tend to look at, in fact, I've been tracking for quite a few years, a couple of different statistics. So if we look at the number of incidents typically an organization is having to deal with and the growth trajectory it had over the last 5 years. So in about the last 5 years, the growth is about 170% in the number of incidents that an organization has had to deal with on average, which isn't, the threats they're facing, it's an incident they've had to respond to. Conversely, if you compare that to how security budgets have grown over the last 5 years, it's about a tenth of that, so it's about 17%. But what does this mean for a CISO? What do they actually need to do to make sure that they can secure that 17% or more of that budget? And so that comes down to them being able to articulate the impact of doing nothing and therefore what that risk is to the business. And they need to have the time and support from the board to be able to then define and articulate that risk. And those that can define and articulate that risk are certainly the ones that are more successful in securing the budget, as the organisation understands the potential risk of doing nothing to their business. And that really is the linchpin in securing investment, and the challenge that most CISOs will have in securing that investment, because it is difficult to articulate risk from a cybersecurity perspective.
And actually, on the point of challenge there, Dave, in terms of getting that investment, I mean, a recent survey that we did here found that the average tenure of a CISO or Chief Information Security Officer is just over 2 years. It's 26 months. Do you think that plays a role or an added complexity in them being able to be articulate or being able to justify getting the investment that they require?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, knowledge brings power, doesn't it? So I think if you look at how a CISO typically approach how they're going into an organization and being able to take stock of the cybersecurity environment as you move into a new role, it takes a considerable amount of time, especially in a large organization. So then moving on and understanding the overall business, so you can articulate the capabilities you have, the capabilities you don't have, how they could affect the business. That takes even longer, but you need to have that overall understanding to be successful at articulating risk, which is how you take that proactive approach. So from a risk perspective, you really can prioritize exactly where you're going to invest. It's often, unfortunately, the case that the investment generally comes after an incident occurs. And since it's Fun Thursday, it actually reminds me of a joke that the CISO of OVF once told at one of our events, so I'll do my best to try and tell it. So it was a CISO who started a new role in an organization, and as he's settling into the role, he sits into his desk, opens a drawer, and he finds 3 envelopes that are in his desk. So on the first envelope, it states, open this after your first major incident. He then looks at the next envelope, it says, open this after your second major incident. And on the third, you guessed it, it says, open this after your third major incident. Anyway, he puts them away, he forgets about them, he gets on with his job, he starts using a decent framework to understand the capability of his existing cyber investment. And then within about 6 months, his first serious major incident occurs. So he goes to his desk, opens a drawer, pulls out the envelope that says open when your first incident hits, and it states, blame the existing technology architecture. So he goes to the board, he blames all the architecture, and he gets investment, and he invests as per his framework. So he starts to go on his improvement plan. So anyway, so he then moves on to evaluating his security program using a second framework, and then a second major incident hits. So he goes, okay, back to the envelopes I go. He opens up the envelopes and he says, blame the bad processes on your predecessor. So he goes to the board, blames his predecessor, he gets investment to fix it. All is good again until many months later, deep into his security improvement program plan, third incident hits. He opens up the third envelope and it simply states, prepare 3 envelopes.
I think there's a semblance of truth perhaps in some of that as well, but I think that probably goes down for this week's joke of the week. So thank you for that, Dave. Let's turn it over to Kerry to see what's coming from our audience as well. Hi there, Kerry.
Hello. Yeah, so we've got quite a bit going on in the audience. So first question, is there so many frameworks out there? How do you prioritize which ones are most important? And that's from Jesse.
Hi there, Jesse. Yeah, so as I mentioned, if you start to look at the three different types of framework you can have. So if you're thinking that you can either have your control framework, you can have your program framework, or your risk framework, you absolutely should be starting at the beginning from a control framework perspective. Equally, there's some frameworks that may be mandated towards you. So from a compliance perspective, you may need to adhere to those. In fact, just a quick segue, if you do get a compliance framework that you generally have to comply with, it's typically more than one you need to comply with. So it's often good to look for a good baseline, a solid baseline, so you can practice some continuous compliance. So if you were to look at a well-known solid baseline like ISO 27001, often it's a step change just to make sure you maintain compliance with other bits and pieces. But back to the original question, how do I decide which one's right for me? I think it depends on the resource you have to be able to spend in it. Some of them are going to take a lot more resources to be able to understand that baseline and build it. Some of them are a lot more simple. It's about understanding the maturity your organization's in to see which one applies to you. And there's some, if you start at the very beginning, so if you were to, I mentioned the Cyber Essentials, I think that's a really good, solid early baseline. You've got Cyber Essentials Plus. And then as you start to handle more sensitive data, you can look to the more comprehensive programs such as NIST, or even, as I mentioned, ISO 27001. So I think it's having a good steer on how mature your organization is and doing some research to see which level you're at from a control program or risk framework, and then just doing some research to understand which one fits well with your maturity within them.
Great, thank you. And we've got a question from Kahindi, but I think that's more for me. Will the recording of the show be available afterwards? Yes, it will. We'll send you the link for that. So Dave, the next one for you. A lot of these frameworks are quite driven by governments themselves. Do you think governments do enough to push that through their supply chains, or the importance of the framework? And that's coming from Rena.
Do they do enough? Short answer is probably not as much as they want to, I think. It is exactly that. So we do engage with a number of governments around the world to support them in their third-party supplier assessment capabilities. And if you look at what is coming, I think there is a large number of frameworks that are being created today, which will help the governments to enforce is a strong word, but ask those organisations that deal with governments to go through a certification program. And I think we're going to see a lot more of it. So do they do enough today? No. Are they going to do some in the future? Absolutely.
Brilliant. And then we have one from Michael, who's asking, are we seeing a stepped up effort to hold CISOs accountable for cyber breaches versus CEOs as in the past?
Are we holding CISOs more responsible than CEOs is the question, is that, if I understand it correctly?
Yeah, so are CISOs being held accountable for the breaches, basically?
Yeah, CISOs are being held, hence the joke. I think that's where we get to, and I think it's a misunderstanding of the role, is that breaches are going to happen. It's inevitable. It's about how you learn from them and respond and recover. And I think it's about having that plan and process in place. So if you think about, so you should be able to identify the biggest risk to your organization and have a plan to be able to respond to those. And it's making sure that you test and regularly deliver against those plans, which will ensure the longevity of a CISO. CISOs, I think that's misunderstood by CEOs and board members, so they see it as a failing of a CISO, but it does need to lead to the question of how do you sort of prove that you did your due diligence to make sure that you're doing a good job, and framework support that.
Cool. And then we've probably touched on this one, but finally, what advice would you give to a CISO who's struggling to get investment? And that's from Paul.
What would I do? I think if you're struggling to get investment, you need to make sure that you can articulate why you need that investment and the potential impact it could have if you were not to do that investment. and the easiest way to try to get it into a language is to monetize it. So I know it's difficult to put a value on the cost of a breach or the impact of a potential breach, but there is a whole host of studies out there that you can sort of look towards. So I think if we looked at the blog I wrote, it was roughly on average it was $3.92 million for each data breach on average. Obviously, broad scale depending on what size your organization is. But I know it's a bit of a scare tactic, but if you can try to get to a point where you can articulate the cost of a breach in a business language, then you're more likely to get the investment to either mitigate it. And at that point, you can probably have a discussion with the board to say, well, look at it as like it's, there are three things you can do. You can accept this risk, so you know that this is going to be the cost should it happen. You can offset it, which means you could potentially insure against it, or you can invest in something to mitigate it. And they're the three options really that the board should be considering when you can outline the potential impact of not investing.
Okay, well, thanks for reading those questions for us. Thanks for writing those questions for everyone at home, and of course, thank you for answering them, Dave. So let's move on to perhaps more the light-hearted aspect of today's show. First question, Dave, make a guess on where one of the Easter eggs might be on this virtual Easter egg hunt today.
Is one of them on the shelf behind you?
No, it's not. That would have been a good place, but no, you're wrong. Sorry. Kerry, what about you?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, is it behind your CISO stress report? I guess is on the shelf behind you. So
that's very well spotted, eagle-eyed. But no, you're also incorrect. So you're going to have to keep those guesses coming in. Has anyone actually guessed from the audience?
I have got loads on the audience. So should we go to Steve and then we can hand over?
Forget Steve. Yes, please do. Steve, have a lucky guess.
Is there one on your laptop keyboard?
Ooh, no, but you are actually very, very close. So there's a big clue for people at home. And if they don't guess that, then there's another opportunity for you, Steve, to make perhaps a similar guess later on. Go on then, Kerry, give us some.
So we have a suggestion from Tony that says there's one in front of you to the left, which he saw you put down, and it's a Milky Way one.
He's close. It was actually Milky Bar. So I'm going to give you that one as a bonus point. Other white chocolate is available. So well done, Tony, for spotting that. So there's actually 6. There's still 5 yet to guess. So any more?
So Alan has put quite a few suggestions on here. So I'll read one now, which is on the windowsill.
No, but that is nearly as close as Steve's guess earlier. So if we don't guess by the end of the show, I will tell you all of the locations.
Tony again, behind the roller banner?
Yes, well done. If that's the same Tony, that's 2 virtual kudos points for you. Let's pause it there. We'll come back to those in a moment. I want to move on to some more light-hearted aspects of the show as well. So coming back to you, Dave, and for everyone that tuned in last Fun Friday, they will be familiar with the fact that we ask a number of obscure questions to our guests as a way of kind of just lightening the mood as we move into the weekend. And today's our bumper show, so we're merging both our GovSec Thursday and our Fun Friday into one. So it's only fair that we ask you some equally obscure questions, I think, Dave.
Okay.
So let's begin with one that's actually a little bit of a cheat. You know about this one already because we needed to carefully orchestrate this one so that we could actually bring up a picture of everybody's socks. Now, everyone that tuned in last week, you remember we said whose socks are whose. If we can have a quick look at that now. Excellent, some beautiful socks there. Now, clearly one of those pairs of socks is yours, Dave, so you are at an advantage, but go on, guess for us, whose are the others, starting from left to right?
I think that the ones on the left are probably Kerry.
Is that true, Kerry?
No, it is not.
Oh no, that's terrible. All right, so I think
It is really.
With the end of those
who's
socks,
got Christmas, are
raise
they
their
Christmas
little
socks?
hands.
Are they Christmas socks anyway? Who's got Christmas socks on?
You to work out.
So in that case, I'm going to go Steve, Kerry,
and Steve would be wearing Christmas socks on a bright sunny day, drinking iced tea. Right, next pair. What do you think, Dave?
They've got to be Kerry.
They are.
Yeah,
well done. So
with the gnomes kissing in
clearly,
the garden, definitely.
you already know which ones are yours. So the third pair, of course, are mine. And what I'm trying to do there is again have a little bit of spring in the air, spring in my step with what are actually dots, but I prefer to call them Easter eggs right now. Excellent. Good. Well, that was the first little bit of fun just to warm us up then, Dave. Plenty more questions to ask you, beginning with, what is your favorite isolation activity right now?
Well, that is tricky. So I think favorite isolation activity, so might have given it away with my socks. I like anything with wheels. So my car has never looked so clean. It's been polished so within an inch of its life. So it's probably a good isolation activity. Really takes your mind off everything. Yeah.
Excellent, good stuff. And next one, a bit more somber. This one. What scares you?
Running out of polish. Okay. It's a tricky one. What's at the moment? I think working out how we get out of this, or not ever being able to go on holiday again. That would scare me for sure. I love to travel, so yeah, that's yeah, interesting concern at the moment.
And Kerry and Steve, remind everyone what yours were.
So mine was spiders.
Too easy.
Steve. Where are you, Steve? Talk to us.
Hello, can you hear me?
Can hear you now, Steve. Go on.
Mine was running out of cheese, because if we run out of cheese in this house, it's meltdown.
Yeah,
I think we have to take an extra trip just for that.
Excellent. Thank you for the quick reminder. Quick reminder for you, Steve, as well, to use the mute button effectively for the next time. If you're an animal, Dave, what animal would you be?
That's easy. I'd be a dog all day long. Imagine that. You get to lay around, go out on walks, chase the postman or a cat, get fed, go back to sleep, repeat. Easy.
Brilliant. Excellent. What is, you might have given a clue to this one already, actually, but what is your favorite exercise or sport?
Yes, that one is easy. So there was a clue to it on my socks. Did anyone catch it and remember?
Cycling?
Yes, Steve, that's right.
Well done, Steve.
Mountain biking, to be precise. I don't enjoy cycling on the road, so anything off road, yeah.
Excellent. And what was your favorite, or what is your favorite piece of technology right now?
Do you know what? That's quite sad. I was thinking about this one because I think it is probably this device, and the reason being is it helps with so much stuff today, and I think you'd probably be lost without it. It really has changed the way the world works and the way we all interact with each other. Some good, some bad, but you know, there's information at your fingertips, which is hugely valuable, and yeah, change the world.
Excellent, thank you, Dave. And last one then, what was your first car?
A bit of a boy racer, so it was a Vauxhall Nova SR. Stupid exhaust on it and some big alloy wheels, yeah.
Very nice. And just to contrast that, actually, Dave, Steve, what was your first car?
Well, mine was a Hyundai Pony. I reckon on a drag race I'd have beat you, Dave.
Especially that last one.
It did have a go faster stripe I put on there with tape, so
yeah,
give it an extra bit of oomph.
Very nice.
Excellent. Well, you know, I don't think there's any way we can top that. So just want to say thank you very much for joining us, Dave. Let's turn back over to Kerry for a quick wash up of this week's news. Oh, and also, are there any other guesses for Easter eggs?
There are other guesses for Easter eggs. So we have in your trash bin, so that must be from across the pond.
Well, okay, good. Well, I don't know if there was many that said that, but yes, in fact, it is under my desk. There is a waste paper basket, as we say in the UK, which does have another egg in it. So well done, kudos to you, whoever guessed that. Well done.
Brilliant. That was Michael, and I think somebody else further up as well. And then in your cup?
In my cup? No, but good guess, but no.
That
No,
would have been a good
chamomile tea is just in my cup today.
place.
So do you guys want to have another guess? Dave, why don't I get you to guess?
Sure, just coming back.
Yeah.
I was having another Steve failure, but I think I'm going to say, are you sitting on one?
Oh, I'm going to let you have that one. There is one under my desk chair.
Hey.
So well done. So that means there is only 2 to find.
We've got a suggestion from Alan saying, is it in your desk drawer?
Oh, Alan, bonus points. Yes, there is one in my desk drawer, just here, in fact. So yes, there is, which means, there we go, just to prove it, there is just one more to find. And this one was the one that Steve was pretty close to before. So Steve, do you want to have another go?
Is it on your mouse mat?
Ooh, getting closer, but no. Kerry, anyone else?
On your wireless keyboard?
No.
Tony says, is it in your hot tub?
If only I had a hot tub. No. It would
You
be melted.
had to leave.
Good.
You had to leave the room earlier just before we went live, Stuart. Did you hide it in there somewhere?
No, I was just eating them.
Oh.
Is it on your laptop?
No, but it's very close. So I'll leave you with that whilst you do a wrap up of today's news, and I will reveal the final one at the close of the show.
The anticipation. Okay, so in the news, the UK and US governments have joined together to put out an alert about COVID-19 scams. This has been reported by Tom Brewster and Forbes. Alex Scroxton from Computer Weekly talks about how that's not the case, and crime volumes don't seem to be increasing, according to data from the NCSC in the UK and from CISO in the US. And there's also an interesting article in IDG Connect on how governments are tackling cybercrime that's definitely worth a good read.
Excellent, thanks, Kerry. And yeah, that kind of the COVID-19 thing is something that's certainly top of mind as we're all in these strange and uncertain times. But you may remember, viewers of this show and those that caught it on demand, that we were speaking to Ellie Bradley earlier in the week from Nominet's registry side, and she was talking about identification of COVID or COVID-19 or coronavirus related domains being spun up. So it's something that we're taking very seriously in terms of looking at whether they are being spun up with legitimate intent, which many of them may be, but also looking at those ones that are slightly more covert or perhaps have a malicious intent. So it will come as no surprise to people on this show that those things are starting to be reported now. So yeah, it's interesting stuff, and it again pays to make sure that we're all paying attention and being vigilant to any new websites or any emails that come through to us that we perhaps don't recognize or are unsure of. So with that, that is it for today's bumper show. So thank you very much to all of my guests that we've had over the week, Alphys Hines, Ellie Bradley and Gary Foote, and of course today's special guest, Dave Polton. Also to everyone that is front of house and behind the scenes here at 0 Days Live, and of course to all of you joining us. It would not be the same without you. Now I do recall that there is just one more egg that was due to be found, and as I said, Steve, you were quite close on this one. Kerry, you got closer as well, and I know that I think it was Tony that got quite close as well. But actually, the final one was actually behind my monitor to this side. So it was behind my monitor. That was the fifth one. So
Oh,
all very
some
close.
last minute ones from Stuart saying that.
Not quite close enough. So thank you very much, everybody, for this week's show. It's been great fun. It's been really informative to speak to our special guests and also to engage with you, of course, our audience. So thank you very much for making the time to see us. Have a very safe weekend, and we'll see you all back here after the extended weekend on Tuesday for another week of 0 Days Live. So thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you again. Thank you.